Oh, good morning.
Morning.
Morning, Dan. Download number 111.
111, unbelievable.
Still ticking away there. So, interesting on market as always, Dan. Always something
It's an interesting market.
on the cards. We're sort of in that October period. October historically has been a little bit of a tricky old month, sort of very volatile at the very least. And we've seen historically a couple of big events happen around the October period.
Anniversary day today, Michael, for Black Monday.
Ah, yes, Black Monday. Yes,
yeah.
yeah. Well, I was still at school back then, but. There'd be a lot of people that would still remember that day very vividly.
Yeah.
It was
so it was the 20th of October in Australia, but the 19th in the US, and I think the US dropped 500 odd, and we dropped 500, 25% on that day.
Yeah,
that's a massive drop in the market, isn't it?
Unbelievable. Yeah. No, well, it'd be interesting to actually. I know we've had John on the download before, but to hear his comments because I think he'd only just sort of set up. I think only a matter of months beforehand, and. Would have been a real baptism of fire. So
I'm sure he thought about going back to teaching.
Well, welcome to the broking world. Absolutely. Yeah. But anyway, no, history's thrown a few wobblies at us. That's for sure.
Yeah. And it's funny, isn't it, Michael? We've been thinking about that Charter Hall real estate investment trust this week. With some of our clients have direct industrial fund number 1, and that was going to get swallowed up into it or paid out. Good news today that they've suspended that float, which is quite interesting, Michael, isn't it? Like on the last day, or it was due to float at midday today, wasn't it? And then they've pulled the pin on it. So a lack of support. And we were discussing, well, maybe it's a good idea to get out of A-REITs, but when you have a look at the charts, a lot of them have now been sold off, haven't they? So.
Yeah, look, they have, Dan. Yeah, I think we only mentioned it a couple of weeks ago that the sell-off was pretty substantial, and it sort of continued on really since then as well. So, but yes, of course, whenever there's a big sell-off, the question then begs, well, do you buy some? Yeah. When they do become a bit cheaper. Yeah. So,
and as a reverse indicator, that Charter Hall pulling that float might be a really good reverse indicator there. It's like banks. Banks always put off staff right at the end of the bad period. Then the market turns, and I'm sure they think, why did we do this? But so it could be a reverse indicator. So we sat down and put a few things together about what to consider with real estate investment trusts. And the first one, I think, and going back to those crashes, is gearing. Too high a gearing is not good. I think it was Gouldson, wasn't it, that coined the phrase at the GFC, debt is death. So.
Yeah, exactly right. And back to the GFC days, I mean, the listed property trusts, as they were sort of known back then, Australian Real Estate Investment Trusts now, they were the worst performing sector by a country mile. And, some of those securities lost 80 to 90% of their value, and of course some, disappeared altogether.
Yes,
so,
and it was the sell-off, wasn't it? They had to sell those properties, and that's another point to cover, the bank covenants. What are the bank covenants in there?
Yeah, absolutely right. And that was the thing, wasn't it? A lot of these property trusts were actually paying their debts. They had the cash flow to pay,
they still had the tenants, didn't they?
The required amount back. But they breached their banking covenants, which were either based on a loan to valuation ratio or some sort of interest coverage or something like that. And of course, the banks have said, well, look, we want our money back, and forced sales of buildings, and it just created this enormous domino effect.
And that's right, it really snowballed, didn't it?
Yeah. I think was it Centro Property? I think they were the ones that sort of started it all. But it was an absolute slaughter.
And then a lot followed suit, didn't they? Like Growth Point and some of the others. Yeah,
there were some pretty high-profile casualties in the end, weren't there? Yeah. Absolutely.
So we've got a few other things. Earning payout ratios. I think they try to pay it between 90 and 95%, don't they? So, that's one to keep an eye on. Net tangible assets. So how much are they priced under or over their actual asset value? And that's a good one with listed investment companies as well, Michael, isn't it? To keep an eye on that one. And the other big one is the weighted average lease expiry. So when's it expire? And we noticed with that property group one we did not long ago that it's only 3.6 years. But there's a few other things to juggle in there, It's good yield at the moment now that it's been sold off.
Yeah, absolutely. But no, it is. It's really important, that weighted average lease expiry, isn't it? And there's arguments for having, a very long one, but of course there can be some cons in that as well. And there's not that ability to increment up,
Yep,
say maybe more
That's
than
right,
inflation.
you're waiting for your 5-year incrementation to come, aren't you?
Yeah,
So,
absolutely. So, but yeah, no, there's always something to consider, isn't there? And
Yes.
yeah, they're good points, aren't they, regarding that A-REIT sector, because you often see investors sort of get a bit, a bit too keen on just getting that yield,
Yes.
getting the income, and
Yep.
again, historically they are good income payers.
And maybe we've seen that a little bit with the likes of Transurban and Sydney airports as well, because they've come off now, and they would have been pushed up on the back of yields.
Yeah, absolutely. Hot off the press, I suppose, from
Yeah.
yesterday, Tattersalls, Tabcorp, both in trading halt. There's been an announcement today that they have actually come together, or looking at coming together.
Yes.
They've agreed on some initial terms. You'd remember, Dan, about 12 months ago, there was, that they both companies had confirmed they had been in talks, but
Yes.
they couldn't come up with an outcome, I suppose.
Yep.
But they've gotten to that point now.
So there's a lot of coffee meetings between now and then, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, still very early days. A lot of water to go under
Yes.
the bridge. Approvals. ACCC. You'd have to wonder how they're going to sort of view all of this. But the long and the short of it is basically Tattersalls shareholders, if the takeover goes through, will get 0.8 of a Tabcorp share, or 80% of a Tabcorp share, plus 42.5 cents in cash. So, but again, still very early days. Tattersalls shares have kicked on that news, of course, today. I think
Yep.
they're up about 4.12 or 4.15 just at the moment. But again, we'll be keeping everyone updated
Yes,
over the
more next
coming
week.
weeks and months. Yeah. So, but a bit of merger and acquisition, it tends to sort of put a bit of a spark under the market generally as well.
Yeah.
So
Puts a bit more focus there, doesn't it?
yeah,
Those guys have got to do something, Michael. All these online gaming companies that are coming in now, it's tough competition, because what do they need? A room like this with a few computers in it, and they're off and running, aren't they?
Yeah, very true. I mean, those traditional services, sitting down at the TAB all afternoon, sure, some people still do it, but
Yeah.
to just slip on the internet, you can do it through your phone now, of
Yeah,
course, so you can,
yes,
be
right,
out and
yeah.
about and place a bet. So yeah, it was only a matter of time before
Yes.
we saw that consolidation to, as you say, sort of fight off that overseas competition.
Yep.
So, but yeah, more to come out of that.
And the other thing I think too is bank reporting. That might start next week with.
Yeah.
Is NAB first up?
I think you're right, yeah. I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, I think they're
Might
very
be,
early November, aren't they?
Yeah.
So yeah, so a bit more info coming out from the banks, so hopefully,
Hopefully they keep the dividends up, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right. They've sort of consolidated around these current prices, so
They have.
market seems to be reasonably comfortable with them
Yep.
just at the moment. But yeah, dividends will be a big question mark, won't they, for sure?
I know. I see too that Basel IV is due out at the end of next year.
Yeah, okay.
So, will that affect the dividends? So maybe make the most of it while the sun shines, hey?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a real moving feast, isn't it?
Yeah.
All that international sort of regulatory framework for banks now.
Yep.
So banks are typically pretty good at manoeuvring, aren't they? So hopefully
Yes.
they
Yep.
should be able to keep the nose above water.
That'll be about us, I reckon.
I think that's it then.
111, done and dusted.
Thank you.